It's that time of year again. Join North Star for its annual homecoming event at Howard University in Washington, D.C. We'll be in person November 13th and 14th and online Wednesday, November 20th, celebrating GIS Day. This year, the theme is art, Afrofuturism, and geography, and we are so excited to feature Black geographers and geopractitioners leading the efforts in climate and environmental justice, geo-AI, storytelling, and more. Help us elevate these voices and shape the future. You won't want to miss it. Get your tickets today at northstarofgis.org/homecoming.
Be Black. Be bold. Be innovative. Show the world equitable geo.
We're coming together as a collective to celebrate people of African descent, the diaspora, and talking about geospatial equity and justice.
You're listening to the North Star Gaze, a podcast with intimate stories from geoluminaries.
Hi, everybody. I'm here today with Dr. Dawn Wright, who is the chief scientist at ESRI. And I know we hear the title and have always been curious about what the title means. You're a friend to North Star, you're a friend and a mentor to me. So if you could tell our audience a bit about what it is that a chief scientist does, and then we can jump right into the episode.
Well, thank you, Aisha, and I'm so happy to be here with you and your audience. Yes, the chief scientist role, this is one of those jobs where ESRI realized that they needed a chief scientist, but they had no idea what that meant. And when I was hired, they said to please do what you think needs to be done. We are hiring you as a team of one. We're not going to give you a team of your own. You're going to report directly to Jack Dangerman as his science advisor. So that is one way to think of this. I'm Jack Dangerman's chief science advisor. But at the same time, I figured out, and I thank ESRI for letting me figure it out and structure it and implement it in a way that I think is working for the company. But I figured out that there are two roles to a chief scientist for ESRI, and this is an internal role to help all of the various teams at ESRI understand what science is, who the major scientists are in the community that we should be working with. And by science, I mean a lot of the sciences that we have been strong in: geology and geophysics on land, ecology, agricultural science, forestry, conservation biology, weather and climate now. Certainly the spatial data sciences, computer science, spatial statistics, imagery, cartography, recently geodesign, sustainability science, social science, and I came to ESRI as an ocean scientist and have been helping out there as well. But across our software products, our product marketing and product management, our business development, our industry solutions, our professional services, consulting firm, our distributors, our marketing, the idea here is to help them to be connected with scientific subject matter experts, to give them scientific resources, papers, studies, to point them to who we should be working with in terms of functional requirements for our software, for our beta testing, to introduce them to scientists for certain strategic relationships. This results for us in having all kinds of workflows and data sets that we can work with, certainly living atlas content. We've been able to do books and blogs and all kinds of social media. We are prepared for the briefings that we have with scientists who want to work with us on special projects and come visit with us. We're able to do better storytelling internally across ESRI in terms of how we're serving the scientific community. So that has been the internal role. And then the external role has been to represent ESRI, not as someone from sales or marketing, but to represent ESRI as a functioning member of the scientific community. So, and I've been at this now for 12 years. It took about 5 years to get going, but I think now 12 years in, ESRI is seen as a member of the scientific community. And for me, this has meant serving on many advisory boards and councils, going to many conferences that are science-based, and we have doubled and tripled the number of ESRI staff who have participated in these conferences as well. I give a lot of keynotes. We have a lot of wonderful research and development projects, applied science projects, universities and nonprofits and government agencies such as NASA and NOAA and the EPA and the USGS, the U.S. Geological Survey. So this two-pronged job has been quite an adventure, but I think it has been certainly a wonderful experience for me, and I think it's been something that ESRI has needed, and I thank ESRI for seeing that need and for bringing me into that role, 12 years ago, and now I'm in the wonderful phase of my time at ESRI where I'm mentoring others. I don't always have to be the one to give the keynote or to serve on a committee or to represent a certain part of the scientific community. We have so much talent within ESRI that has been my honor to lift up and to amplify so that they can step into some of these roles as well.
I know when I first met you, I was curious. So it's been a 12-year career at ESRI. How did you get introduced to GIS?
Well, I was introduced to GIS as a doctoral student at UC Santa Barbara in the early 90s when GIS was really starting to take flight in terms of an analytical tool that was being used not just for utilities, not just for the military, across all of these different disciplines that I talked about. And my studies as a doctoral student at UC Santa Barbara were about ocean mapping, specifically mapping the ocean floor. And so I was pursuing that with GIS. I was introduced to GIS as a remarkable integrative and analytical tool that could work with many different types of data sets to help one see a fuller picture of how the Earth was working in terms of a particular process. And for mine, it was seafloor spreading. So having learned about GIS, and the deep, dark secret of ESRI's chief scientist is that she didn't even know what the GIS acronym stood for until she got to her PhD program at UC Santa Barbara. But just to give me a little bit of slack, this was a long time ago in the early 90s. Now we have first graders who are working with ArcGIS Online and doing all kinds of amazing story maps. And it's wonderful how the literacy of GIS has percolated throughout all levels of education. And we take it for granted now that children should know what GIS is. We work hard to make that the case on GIS Day, especially.
Okay, so North Star made the call to folks to present on GIS Day. You have always accepted the call from North Star. Why?
There's so much work to do. I think North Star needs to hear from as many of us who are in the industry, and certainly there are not many of us who have leadership, directorships, vice presidencies, or CEO status in the industry. So I will never refuse such a call because there are not enough of us who are in those senior positions throughout the geospatial world. And so it's absolutely important that I share my perspective. And I thank North Star for always wanting to include me. And this is also a gender issue because there are not many of us Black women who are in these positions. So we need to hear from all of us.
I agree. And I know it can't be easy. So speaking of, when I talked with Sandra Utcher, we talked about imposter syndrome. I was surprised, and I still am surprised how many senior ranking director level women encounter imposter syndrome. So it's not just something that you encounter early in your career. It's something that you are working against at so many different levels of your career. Do you encounter imposter syndrome? And then how do you navigate it?
Oh my goodness, yes. I encounter imposter syndrome all the time, especially as the later in your career you get and you are noted for doing certain things. So the expectation is that you'll be able to not only do that, but to do something different or better. And I think especially if you are a Black woman or someone who is a canary in a coal mine, or I usually call myself, using the biblical term, a lizard in a king's palace from the Old Testament in terms of being one of, I think, 4 or 5 now women who are on the director's council of ESRI running this company, along with Jack Dangerman, the only Black woman, although now not the only woman of color, thank goodness, because Tamisa Greening, our our director of legal is now a director at ESRI. But when you are just one of a few or the only one, that's when the imposter syndrome has hit me. And that has been my story from the very beginning, always. And I know so many in your listening audience can relate to this. The only one in class, the only one for me out at sea, the only one in this very powerful board meeting. So oftentimes I'm like, what am I doing here? And I've had to work so hard to get my degrees and to get my research papers published and to do all the things that I had to do as a professor, because I was a professor for 17 years before coming to ESRI. And then coming to ESRI with this unicorn of a job, this chief scientist role that had never been imagined in this role before. There was a prior chief scientist at ESRI, but that was a role that particular individual created for himself. And it was very, very internal facing. But here's this new role that I was hired into. I did receive some resistance at ESRI in terms of, we don't need a chief scientist. We're a software company. What are you doing here? What do you hope to accomplish? Oh my gosh, that is a perfect recipe for imposter syndrome. Now that I'm in the National Academy of Sciences as an elected member, there are a lot of, it's not just a certificate or an award that they give you. You are expected to perform, to give advice. You're on committees. You're meeting with federal agencies. So it does not stop in that sense. It's sort of like if you're an athlete and you set a record, or if you have a double, you do well on the court in basketball, and the expectation is that you're going to do that again, is that you're always going to do that. You're going to do more. You're going to have a triple. So that, I think that's the way professional life is. I've always had my mother as a fantastic mentor and guide and inspiration, who's always helped me to knock that imposter syndrome down. And there's a wonderful young oceanographer. Her name is Moronki Harris. She is a fantastic science communicator, and she's involved with many, many organizations. She is currently working as a consultant on the development of a novel. And I'm taking the time to talk about this because she had a wonderful posting on LinkedIn about imposter syndrome. The point that she makes is that imposter syndrome might actually make you more likable because you work hard, you play well with others, you do everything that you can to be the best that you can. So that's a nice trade-off of having imposter syndrome. So I think it's something that is natural. A lot of us have it. A lot of us have it throughout all stages of our careers. It can be used for good. And so I wouldn't be ashamed of it. I would find ways to certainly get through it and to absolutely not let it hold you back or get you down, but find a way through it and realize that you can make lemonade out of lemons, so to speak, from that. You can take advantage of it.
So how did you get through it?
Oh, it's just confidence and self-belief and looking back at what happened last year. Look what you were able to accomplish last year. Look at the fantastic people that you have around you. For me at Oregon State, it was my students. Look at what you've done with those students. Look at how they make you better. For me at ESRI, it's absolutely the colleagues that I have around me to support me. It's the support that I have from Jack Dangerman. Jack Dangerman believes in me. He supports me. He gives me advice. He always has my back. So it's always focusing on those positive circumstances. And it does not hurt to have a beautiful, loving golden retriever who always wants a hug.
So Dawn, have you ever experienced a goalpost moving? So when I think of Simone Biles and Syria Bonali, when I think about those people and I think about the pushback they get for pushing the field and pushing the envelope with skills and then being told like, oh my gosh, that's too advanced. And it's just like, aren't we trying to be the best in our field? So the goalpost somehow keeps moving that you're too good. Have you ever experienced that once you have reached a certain point in your career, like for some people, they have the metrics that they have to meet that year, and then the goalpost just somehow keeps moving? Have you ever experienced that?
Oh, yes. I think it's never going to be enough in a sense. And especially for those of us who are of color. Another another posting that I saw recently was by the Black and Marine Science organization. They do a fantastic job to celebrate marine scientists. These are people in their 20s, their 30s. They're just starting their career. I started my career 40 some years ago. And my hope was that here in the 2020s, this would not even be a discussion, it would not even be a conversation. But it is. And I think it's because of the snail's pace that our society is moving in terms of recognizing and acknowledging and celebrating and being comfortable with our people, especially with Black people. And then, of course, we have these evil forces in our society, in the world, that are racist, that are fascist. Let's call it what it is. And we are in a fight. We are in a fight for our lives. And these young people in Black and Marine Science just recently produced a video for the Ocean Sciences meeting, one of the largest ocean science meetings in the world. And they're saying in the video, of course, I have to work 10 times harder. Of course, I'm Black, but I do know how to swim. Of course, I'm Black, but I do care about community engagement. Of course, I'm Black, but please don't underestimate my intelligence. They are having to say this in a video. The goalposts are constantly moving. And that has certainly been my experience at in the university realm. You are just an affirmative action hire. You are here because of that, not because you belong, but because you're a Black woman and you were available and we grabbed you. So oftentimes for me and as athletes, you and I, we can relate to this. I'm like, okay, you're going to be like that. I'm going to drive the lane and I'm going to dunk on you. Mm-hmm. So the goalpost for academics is 6 years to get to tenure. So I was able to do it in 4 years at my university. I hate talking about things that I've accomplished, but I think it's appropriate just to use that as an example, because the detractors who were in my department and who were holding the goalpost, they really had no answer. They had no answer to that. So they eventually left me alone. And I think a lot of us in our careers, we do have to push to the point where there is no answer or for the detractors in our midst. And then we push on and we open the door for others. And as Lily Gladstone, who's up for the Academy Award as the first Indigenous actress to be nominated, I love what she says. She and her agent, I think, say to not just get through the door, but to stand in the door, keep it open so that others can walk through.
I love that. Okay. And that is a smooth segue into my next question. Because there are so few Black women at the C-suite executive level, what are some pathways you've seen for Black women to get into the C-suite if that is what they choose to do? Because that is not everyone's end goal, but for some people it is.
Well, that's a very good question. And what I have seen is women who have created their own consulting firms. So that is a wonderful way to get to the C-suite. You become your own boss or you have your own operation. And one of the things I love about North Star is seeing all the examples of women who are doing that. There's also the resilience. This is where the resilience comes in, the longevity, and you work your way up through your organization, through the system. So the recent example for me is Dr. Deborah Grayson at the National Geographic, working her way up through the National Geographic to be the director of education. And I think that is the normal mode for people at ESRI as well. The other women who are in the C-suite at ESRI have done that, with the exception of myself and one other person, because we were hired into the C-suite. That's another way to do it. It's very rare. For me, it's still like crazy, but it happens. It can happen. And you can be hired into the C-suite from one sector into another. So in my case, I was recruited from academia directly into this role at ESRI. Each story, each pathway is tremendous. Each has its value, and I think they're all inspirational. Another thing, though, is that oftentimes you look at someone and you want to follow exactly their path. And that is not always possible. My story, I consider my story to be so crazy that it's not a template for everybody. I don't think we need to be afraid of that or worry about that. Even if you don't see all the time your own people, that can't be a template for all of us. We are not going to be able to go into a situation where we are surrounded by Black people all the time, as much as that would be empowering and wonderful or part of your background, but you can't let that stop you. Sometimes you have to make your own template and forge your own path. Sometimes you can follow very closely to what someone else has done, but sometimes you can't. So I just wanted to add that as well.
Right.
Don't let that stop you.
Put a finer point on it, right? We're still at the point where we have many first. So there are many paths that have yet to be charted. And sometimes you've got to blaze your own path. So kind of along that same thought line, when we talk about diversity breeding innovation in the field of GIS, what do you think the future looks like if we do not rapidly diversify, if we do not rapidly invest in the identities that have been pushed to the margins? What are you predicting will happen? I'm worried. Are you?
Oh my goodness, we are facing a huge danger of backsliding big time. We're already seeing how we're in this downswing because of George Floyd's murder, and all of these organizations signed on with these DEI statements trying to show solidarity and trying to say that, society does need to change and we're going to pivot. And we now care about this issue, and we care about looking at just about any issue through a racial equity lens, not just an equity lens. Equity is certainly important, but we are talking about racial equity, particularly in the United States with our terrible. Let us not forget about that. So these organizations signed on to these agreements, or we thought that they were going to be sincere in this, and now we are in a period where they are scaling back on that. I still am very close to the university, the academic world, and there are these institutions of higher education in Texas and Florida, especially, that are not only scaling back, but they are destroying, or they're stopping their DEI programs. They don't want you to talk about it in the classroom. I think we're all well aware of how that is crippling us and how we're backsliding. The GIS industry, the geospatial industry, I think is similar. We can't take our foot off the pedal, so to speak. Now we have at ESRI, we've had this racial equity and social justice initiative. Of course, North Star is an employee resource group within ESRI that has spun off into this wonderful nonprofit. I see danger ahead there, though. If that is marginalized, if that's pushed to the side. So using ESRI as an example, we can't let that happen. And the way that Clinton Johnson has informed my thinking and helped me to grow, even as a Black person, is the GIS provides these insights into inequity and inequality. There are ways that we can fashion our tools so that we can see these insights as we are doing our analyses, and so that we have this. It's sort of like for me as a physical scientist, the idea of statistics. They're basic statistics, but the realm of spatial statistics has just blown that field into the stratosphere in terms of their insights, and how spatial statistics is now a basic understanding, a basic requirement, a basic tool across all of the physical scientists if you're looking at the connection between pattern and process. And to me, I see what North Star is pushing for in terms of getting not only our people, but this lens, this insight into the way that we do GIS. But I do see danger ahead, because there are organizations, and ESRI needs to watch out for this as well, that think, okay, we've done enough, we're bored with this, or we're not seeing enough progress with this. Let's move on to something else. Let's put all of our energy and all of our our being into building digital twins. Well, digital twins, again, there is a racial equity lens that we must use there as well.
Yeah. So to be continued, right? It's going to be an ongoing conversation. It's like if we're going to go into battle and if our systems and allyship is going to cave at the first pinprick of pressure, then it's a really rocky footing. And are we actually helping or hurting by even making these statements to begin with? Show me with your actions and not necessarily with your words on a website. Okay. So one of the critical ways that North Star is trying to address and head off the danger point moving forward is to take whatever resources we have, whatever allyship we get from different companies that want to partner with us, is to actually start to invest in our young people that have been pushed to the margins and bring folks in. It's amazing to me that we have communities that have always mapped the earth. We have abstracted mapping in such a way that GIS is a thing. And so I'm just going back to your statement earlier when you were like, when I got started, I didn't know what GIS was, right? And so I remember being an instructor in a classroom, we would get students that would come in and they're like, tell me more about GIS. And some students would say, tell me more about GIS, right? So we've abstracted mapping so far outside of the realm. We've gave it a name, we've given it a title, an entire lexicon around mapping, agriculture, protecting the earth and the ecosystems and not commodifying. And now we've done this thing and we put it apparently so far out of reach. So how do we bring it back together, right? And so when we talk about young people, so right now we have young people who are getting excited about GIS, young people who look like me, while they are also going through MBA programs and different areas of science and economics. So what if I'm a young person who's extremely excited about a possibility of working in a GIS field? How do I bring that together on my resume? And how do I articulate my GIS capabilities in an interview setting?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, one of the things that we are working on at ESRI right now, it's another one of Jack Dangermond's visions, is transforming the current GIS or GI science curriculum, K through gray, but certainly at the higher education level, extending to MBA programs, social science programs, digital humanities, so that everyone is exposed to not only GIS, but the modern GIS that's on the web. And the web is very powerful because I think to get to the point, young people need to have their own portfolios. And a lot of us now are familiar with personal branding because if we're on social media, that is a personal brand. We are showing ourselves to the world. We are constructing a story, a narrative about who we are, what kind of people we are. And if you want to know the things that Aisha, that you care about, I can go to Facebook or Instagram and I can see what's in your feed. And your feed is you. I think for students, they can really set themselves up for success by having a portfolio that's either a feed in social media, or with ESRI, we have the story map. There's so many young people now who have their own portfolios as a story map. That's one idea. And all of your trainings, all of your projects, all of the things that you've done in the GIS world, it's there as a story map that you can click on in an interview and just scroll through it and talk about it. That's a link that you can put in your application that you can share. And once that link is clicked, it opens up your world. I started having my students do this in the 1990s, actually. I said, you guys, when you're looking for jobs, you need to have your own website. It's got your CV there. It's got your projects. It's got your data. And I think that still holds, except for now we have these wonderful apps. A story map is basically an app. So if you've got your portfolio of an app in an app form, I think that is one, I don't want to call it a silver bullet, but it's pretty powerful. And it certainly works for those of us who look at incoming applications here at ESRI.
So it's interesting that you say that because I'm in a number of tech groups that are focused on Black women. And I see this question sprinkled at least a few times a month I'm afraid to post something on my LinkedIn page because coworkers might see it or my bosses might see it. And I really try to urge the younger people to understand that LinkedIn is your personal portfolio.
Yep.
What you choose to share, what you choose to say is a representation of you. Use it that way. Leverage it as a digital resume. If you don't have a website, but start to look at it as it is yours. Don't let someone else put fear in you for presenting the you that you want an employer to see. So thank you for mentioning that.
Yes, thank you also for mentioning LinkedIn, because I think LinkedIn as a community is designed specifically for that. It's hard to do these kinds of things on Instagram or Facebook or some of these other platforms, but LinkedIn is the professional Facebook. And so absolutely LinkedIn.
So Dawn, let's talk about legacy. You've reached a point in your career where you're now, okay, what do I want my legacy to be? You've come to this more intimate event. Of all of the events that you could go to, hundreds of thousands of people in the audience. One, what do you want your legacy to be? And then what is the value of these smaller events in terms of access?
Well, I think access has become both a blessing and a curse for me at this stage in my life and in my career, because when you are accessible, it's overwhelming. The requests, I get a range of requests from staff at ESRI who want me to speak to their children about exploration, to young high schoolers who are out there trying to get a homework assignment done and they want to interview you for the homework assignment, all the way to these organizations that want you to take on a bigger role. Can you come and be the director of this aquarium? Can you serve in the White House on this committee? All kinds of things. And certainly, can you give this talk or this keynote? Can you come here? Can you make a personal appearance or a virtual appearance? It's actually become way, way, way too much. But at the same time, I want access to be my legacy. I do want that to be something that people treasure, that people have been able to be helped by, accessibility and kindness. So I do try to get back to everyone in some way. I now have different ways that I've developed to cope with the overwhelming amount of requests for access. I don't have an agent. I need an agent. I don't even really have a dedicated admin, and that's the nature of my unique role. But I have these resource pages that are just about every interview that I've given is available, and people can have that and use that. There are all kinds of other pages or story maps or sites that, again, similar to a student portfolio, I can give that person this link and then they can have at it. But the important thing is that people do get an answer. I do not want to be one of those people that you send them something. Some people are pouring out their stories, their hearts and their souls, especially from other countries. And to do that and not get an answer, I know I would be devastated or disappointed by that. And so I try my very, very best not to do that. So accessibility with kindness, that's the legacy.
I love that. I love that. Okay. The theme of the 2023 homecoming event is resilience or resistance. Which of those resonates with you most at this point in your life?
Well, for me, it's resilience. There's a bit of resistance there, certainly, as we were talking about. We are all in this battle of the ages against racism and fascism, and it moves on to dealing with how the climate is changing and how the earth is struggling. But in my remarks, to tie this to the North Star Homecoming, I mainly spoke about resilience and the idea of reinventing oneself and fortifying, caring for oneself. I talked quite a bit about managing one's time by way of managing your energy. It's really resilience in managing your day-to-day energy. And I know you are champion at this, Aisha, because you are a parent. I am not a parent. All of you who have children, you are my superheroes. You are superstars. That is the key. So for me, it's resilience.
Oh, you're going to make me cry. Thank you for your kind words. So Dawn, you mentioned racism and all the monsters that are out there. If the zombie apocalypse were to happen at this moment, How would you use all of your skills in GIS, science, oceanography, and life skills, and Riley's help to survive the zombie apocalypse?
Oh, well, Riley and I would get into a little dinghy or yacht, and we would head out to sea. That would take care of it, I think. And then I could use GIS to navigate out into the Pacific. And once we got to the Western Pacific, I think we would actually head for Palau. And we would use GIS to navigate among all of those many islands there to escape any zombies that we might encounter. I never see zombies that do well in the water. So I think being an oceanographer, I've got it. I think we found their Achilles heel.
Well, Dawn, thank you so much from all of us here at North Star. We appreciate you taking the time to chat with us on the inaugural season of the North Star Gaze podcast.
Oh, it's been a delight and an honor. Thank you so much.
And on that note, thank you to our listeners. I want to thank the sponsors of the 2023 Homecoming Conference event, which was held on Howard University's campus. Thank you, National Geographic Society, National Academy's Gulf Research Program, Mapping Black California, Hope and Heal, and Spatial GIS. We also want to give a special thanks to our guests. Thank you for trusting us with your stories. Shannon, Sandra, Kevin, Margot, Frank, Jen, Dr. Luberz, Carrie, Dr. Graham, Gloria, Michael, Eric, Sky, Nick, Dr. Yaboa Kwarkum, Veronique, and Dawn. We also want to thank Howard University for allowing us to present in the iconic browsing room. And to the North Star team, thank you, Shakanda, Raisha, Clinton, Erica, Yolanda, and our volunteers and student ambassadors. Thank you also to KMG. Audio is produced by Cherry Blossom Production, and I'm Aisha, your host and the executive producer of the inaugural season of the North Star Gaze podcast, which is based on the 2023 Homecoming Conference event.
Thanks for listening to the North Star Gaze, intimate stories from geoluminaries. If you're inspired to advance racial justice in geofields, please share this podcast with other listeners in your community. The intro and outro are produced by Organized Sound Productions with original music created by Kid Bodega. The North Star Gaze is produced in large part by donations and sponsorship. To learn more about North Star GIS, check us out at northstarofgis.org and on Facebook or Instagram at GIS North Star. If you'd like to support this podcast and North Star of GIS, consider donating at northstarofgis.org/donate. Or to sponsor this podcast, email podcast@northstarofgis.org. You've been listening to the North Star Gaze.